Thank you. Please be seated. This is the matter of the State of Washington versus Edward C. Troyer Jr., Pierce County District Court Case Number 1 AC 002225. These proceedings are being live streamed through the Pierce County District Court website. Viewers are reminded, however, that they are prohibited from photographing or audio or video recording these proceedings without the prior permission from the court. This prohibition also applies to courtroom observers. Only credentialed media, which have been granted permission from the court in advance, are permitted to photograph, audio, and or video record these proceedings as outlined in the court's November 4, 2022 media coverage order. To courtroom observers, jurors have a duty to decide this case based only on the evidence presented. To ensure both parties receive a fair trial, it is my duty to minimize the risk that jurors are influenced by external factors. For that reason, courtroom observers are prohibited from wearing clothing or accessories with political or social justice messaging. If you are currently wearing or displaying anything that meets that description, please cover it up or put it away. Thank you for your cooperation. And defense, we ready to continue?
Your Honor, before we continue, I have an additional motion to dismiss I'd like the court to hear and rule on today.
In addition to the State versus Green sufficiency of the evidence?
In addition to the arguments made by Ms. Bremner earlier.
Additional arguments on the same motion?
Same motion, different argument.
Oh, go ahead.
This one. Why is reserved? Does that make sense?
And Your Honor, I would like to make it clear that we are not waiving any argument that Ms. Bremner made earlier and asked the court. We're still reserving that argument, and if the court denies the motion now, intend to potentially present briefing and further argument in the future.
Thank you.
Okay. The elements that the state cannot prove in this case, for count one, is causation. That the alleged false report was likely to cause an emergency response. The element in count two that the state cannot prove is the materiality element, that the false or misleading statement was material. And the reason for that, Your Honor, is that the state has presented no evidence that the dispatchers who handled this call would not have initiated an emergency response but for Sheriff Troyer's statements that Mr. Altimer threatened to kill him. In other words, the state has not presented any evidence that the non-threatening information that they received was insufficient to initiate an emergency response.
Could you say that sentence again, please?
The state has not presented any evidence that the non-threat information that Sheriff Troyer provided to dispatch was insufficient to itself initiate an emergency response. And I'd like to play the 911 call for the court and point out the other information that was sufficient to initiate an emergency response.
Don't call the 911 call. Don't call the 911 call.
The dispatch call.
Is this Exhibit 2? Oh, I'm sorry. Correct, Exhibit 6, my apologies.
Yeah, I know, I got it.
Radio. Hey, it's Troyer.
Okay. Now it's presenting. Okay.
Hey. Radio. Hey, it's Troyer. What can I do for you? I'm at 27th and Deidre in Tacoma in North End. About 2 blocks from my house, and I caught somebody in my driveway who's just threatened to kill me, and they blocked him in. He's here right now. Okay. Go again with your address? Well, my address is 2901 North Vista. I'm at 27th and Deidre. Okay. And he's in some sort of gray car, and he was in my driveway, in my neighbor's driveway, and he knows who I am, and he threatened to kill me, and I got him blocked in at 27th and Deidre. I think his plate is Boy Williams, Boy 57. Hang on. I really need just 1 or 2 people here first.
Absolutely, I'm getting the call right now.
Hang on, he's not going to let me leave.
Okay, does he have a gun or anything?
I have no idea. He looked homeless in his car, but he was in my driveway, and I got my car, and he was in my neighbor's driveway, tried to get my garage. Hang on. Boy, William Boy, 5872.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I got him blocked in. I'm in a white Tahoe.
Okay.
My own personal white Tahoe. He's taking pictures and video and news.
Okay. I've got units headed your way.
I just need 1 or 2 to clip. He was in my neighbor's houses and climbing. Sorry, but...
No, you're good.
Going on. I think they found me. All right.
Okay, stay on the phone with me, though, okay? Just so I can make sure.
I don't want to hang up. I'm trying to back up and let him go, but he blocked me in.
Okay. What kind of car is he in?
I don't know, some sort of beat up, chuckled, homeless looking Sion. I gave you the plate number.
Yeah.
Blackness. Nobody polite to him, and he just says I'm a racist and wants to kill me. So
Okay.
I don't want anything other than him to let me go home, which is 2 blocks away, which I just came out of my house.
Anybody else with him, Chief?
No. I'm not mad at him or anything, but he's...
Okay.
I think he might have one of those garage door openers because he pulled into 4 or 5 different houses around the neighborhood and tried to hit the garage door opener button.
Yeah.
My house I'm doing a remodel, so there's so much room, and there's no room in the driveway, so he tried it everywhere else. So he's looking for me.
Okay.
I'm still here. I'm backing up. He's pushing against my car, so I'm just backing up. 27 B.
Okay, they should be there shortly, too.
Deidre. So weird. It's like one of those old radio stare downs. He's just staring at me with headlights on. And,
Okay.
I'm glad we're a couple blocks from my house. Everybody else is supposed to kill me for all this. All right.
Yikes. Do you hear the officers?
No, I don't hear anything.
Don't hear
It's a weird road off 29th and Vista, 2 blocks above my house.
Okay.
No. He's taking video and pictures of me. It's just him alone. It's so weird.
Okay. Did he give you his name or anything?
No, he just said that I was home and saw the lights coming in on and out and everything. I looked, and he was like pulling in all the driveways. And I thought maybe it was one of those guys that's like kind of a thief that has a garage door opener.
Yeah.
And so I went out and followed him, and then he blocked me off and accosted me and said, "You're a cop," and started threatening me, which is not a big deal, but it's part of our deal now, right?
Apparently, yeah.
I mean, he literally blocked me in. And here comes the first guy.
Okay.
They're right behind me.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so the first cop is right there. Yeah. So
you. I'll let you go, okay?
Thank you. Coma's
You betcha. Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, bye.
So, the information provided by Sheriff Troyer in that call that has nothing to do with threats is clearly the type of information that could initiate an emergency response. Some of that information, some of this information by itself or in combination is clearly sufficient. I caught someone in my driveway. He was in my neighbor's driveway. He tried to get in my garage. I'm trying to let him go. He blocked me in. He accosted me. He said, "You're a cop." He's not going to let me go. All of that non-threat information is sufficient to initiate an emergency response. And more to the point, for a motion like this, the state has presented no evidence that dispatch would not have initiated an emergency response but for sheriff's statements that Mr. Altimer threatened to kill him. And one other thing to point out is that at the very beginning of the call, Sheriff Troyer identifies himself. He says, "Hey, it's Troyer." And Conrad Shadle, the 911 dispatcher who answers the inside line call, knows who he is. He testified to that. And his response is, "What can I do for you?" And that matters because this is not a random person calling. This is a person that Mr. Shadle testified that he's worked with for 8 years and has had numerous conversations with. So when you have that type of working relationship, the caller is a trusted caller. You take what he's saying at face value, and I think it is completely unreasonable it would be completely unreasonable for a jury to find that the non-threatening statements in this case are insufficient to initiate an emergency response. But again, more to the point for this motion, it's the state who has the burden, and they've presented no evidence from their dispatchers about whether that was material to their decision to dispatch. It may not have been a priority zero help the officer call with this other information, but an emergency response would have been initiated. And that goes to elements of both of the charges against him. The materiality element of the making a false or misleading statement to a public servant, and the causation element of the false reporting charge. We'd ask the court to dismiss this case.
Is the defense revising its prior request concerning this to wait until Monday so more research could be presented?
For this argument, we are asking for a ruling now, yes.
Well,
Before we present.
there's a motion to dismiss. When I rule that, I'm not going to entertain information after I rule that should have been presented now. I mean, this is not 2 bites at the apple, so I need to understand what the defense is requesting.
Then we ask the court to rule now.
So to be clear, the defense is modifying its prior position for the court to wait until Monday.
Correct.
State's response.
With response to only that issue, Your Honor, what has to be shown is that the false statement initiated the emergency response. And here, Mr. Shadle at length indicated that it was these statements that he heard and typed into the CAD, which were then seen by Ms. Heiberg, that caused them to send the police. Whether or not other statements unrelated to that might have also been sufficient to do that isn't the issue here. The issue is, was the false statement about the threats to kill, was that information then used by these dispatchers to send an emergency response, and that's been testified to at length by 2 of the dispatchers. I will also note that looking at the CAD, which the court can look at as well, that would be helpful. There was testimony by Mr. Shadle that the only need one more unit downgrade by Officer Lawless came at 209.50. And I would note that Mr. Shadle also read into the record the first the first 4 lines that he typed into the CAD. At 2:05, caller's name Troyer, that was 2:05:12, 27th and Deirdre making threats to kill, 2:05:19, BWB 5872 is the license plate number, 2:05:35, Troyer calling in stating male subject making threats to kill him. He's in a white personal Tahoe. That's the information that was typed in that caused Ms. Heiberg to issue a priority 0 response, which is the only testimony in the record. Between that time and when Officer Lawless downgrades the call and 43 units begin responding to the scene, I will note that there's no other information about any of these other issues which have nothing to do with the threat to kill. All the state has to prove is that that false statement, someone threatened to kill me, was likely to cause an emergency response. And that's exactly what the dispatchers testified to.
Thank you. Defense response, if any?
Yes, the statute requires that the false information initiated the emergency response, and I think implicit in that is a causation, which is that the false statement has to have caused the emergency response. And I think also implicit in that is, but for the false statement, there would have been no emergency response. And so that's my argument with as far as the false reporting charge. As far as the other charge, which I don't think the state addressed, the materiality, I mean, that's clearly encompassed in my argument, which is it has to be material, meaning if it wasn't for that, this wouldn't have happened.
Thank you. Given the additional information, the court's going to reserve a ruling until Monday on. Defense ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor, I actually have just another matter to address on the orders in limine before we get back into testimony, and that is the D, state's motion to exclude procedural history and charging decisions, and E, politically motivated charges. The court had granted in limine pre-trial their motions on those issues, and as we all know, orders in limine are preliminary and oftentimes, can be re-raised when the evidence changes. And I think that in this case, it's important that we be allowed to get into some of these issues. This is a very unusual case. It wasn't filed by the Pierce County prosecutor. It was basically picked up and taken and brought forth by the governor and the Attorney General's office. My client has a letter from the governor's office that essentially said that there was a request for concurrent jurisdiction with Pierce County for this case, and that letter is dated April 23rd, 2021, and it simply says to the division chief of the criminal division here in Pierce County, signed by Jay Inslee, Dear Mr. Hillman, pursuant to RCW 4310-230 and 4310-232 1B, I request that the Washington State Attorney General shall have concurrent authority and power with the Pierce County prosecuting attorney to investigate the above referenced case for criminal violations of the revised Code of Washington and to initiate and conduct any prosecution arising from said investigation. If it is deemed appropriate by the Attorney General to initiate a prosecution and prior to the commencement of the prosecution, the Attorney General and the county in which the offense occurred shall reach an agreement regarding the payment of costs, etc., and it cites a statute on the issue of payment for fees, costs with the prosecution, et cetera. It's,
What is the date of that letter?
it is April 23rd, 2021. And I'm going to hand up a copy to the court.
Do you want it marked as an exhibit?
Happy to, yeah, would be great, Your Honor.
We're on letter L.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that letter, was sent, and first of all, in terms of this evidence being relevant, any prosecution that was basically taken away from this county and taken on by another entity, the AG and the governor, smacks of being political. My client's elected, they're elected, Ferguson's elected, the governor's elected, et cetera. But it also needs to be described to the jury because the prosecutor here, John Hillman, said in response to this, no. Pardon? Oh, sorry, Mary Robinette, the actual elected prosecutor, declined on a number of occasions. When I look at something like this, and I submit to the court, when you look at some of the prosecutions that we've seen in the Justice Department, over the years, and complaints of, prosecutorial misconduct or some kind of, targeted investigation, or anybody, even like we see Trump when he's talking about being investigated a myriad of ways improperly, whatever, there can be prosecutions that are political. There can also be wrongful prosecutions. The Duke Lacrosse case, an individual prosecutor, Mike Nifong, went to jail for that and was disbarred for that prosecution. Amanda Knox case in Italy. I mean, there's cases that West Memphis 3. So from that, we know that they can happen. We know there's allegations of these things. I think the jury should be entitled to know that we look at the weight of this case and whether or not their elected sheriff is guilty of a crime. How did this case come about? Because it didn't come through the normal channels. And I think it goes to whether or not he's guilty or not guilty. If it's truly political, it could be based on very little, but intent in politics. And they have a right to know that. But my client also has a right to tell the jury what happened here, because in the way he acted and didn't act, and what he said and didn't say. Because when this letter was issued, he did not come forth and become part of the investigation. The jurors are probably wondering, how come there's all these lawyers and paperwork and everything else in this case, but we don't have anything from the sheriff? Well, he wasn't asked to participate. He was the target, and then, of course, the accused, once they filed their two-part gross misdemeanor complaint. So that's important and relevant to his case in terms of what they put forth in terms of their case. There's nothing in it from Troyer because he didn't participate. He was an accused. I think it's also important in a case like this that is so unusual, when we look at basically the landscape, I guess you could say, of where we were in this state and across the country when this was all happening. We had chaos, we had the CHOP, et cetera, in Seattle, we had Black Lives Matter, we had the defund the police. So this was in a political climate at the epicenter of it in some ways when he was charged. He's entitled to have the jury know that. This isn't your typical case in all of those respects. It is political. This is not a case the county brought. There was a warrant of probable cause, presumably. They didn't bring it. There was no decision in this county that had the jurisdiction to charge their own sheriff with a crime. If there were sufficient facts, like we've heard from the prosecutors over and over in this case, you know that the duty bound to do that. Their duty is to do complete justice. But in this case, that's not what happened. It went someplace else. It didn't go someplace else. It got picked up and taken by somebody else who went after Sheriff Troyer. So I didn't see, I'd have to go back and look at the briefing, but I don't see that there should be a grant of a blanket order to not get into these kinds of issues. Because, frankly, in a country these days so divided, if this jury thinks that this case came through the normal channels and everything's copacetic, That's wrong. And I don't think it's right for the jury to be in a position where they don't know the true facts. This case came from somewhere else. It didn't come from Pierce County. It didn't come from this prosecutor. It didn't come from an investigation here. It came politically from the Attorney General's office and the governor. What else? If I have a moment, what else? And there's also testimony from my client as to conflicts, I guess you could say, with them that caused some of this to happen. And I think that's all germane to whether or not, is he guilty or not guilty, and for the jury's consideration. Thank you.
The court has reviewed Defendant's Exhibit L that was presented to the court, so I want to make a record that I did read the letter. The court granted state's motion in limine D, which reads the state's motion to exclude procedural history and charging decisions, and the court granted state's motion in limine E, which reads the state's motion to exclude any inference or suggestion that these charges are politically motivated. The defense motion is denied. Anything else from the defense?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Anything else from the state?
No, Your Honor, but could I have like literally a 2-minute break before you bring the jury out?
Of course. Do you want to stand? Do
Unless
you want
there's more.
the court to stay on the record, or would you rather?
No, thank you, Your Honor. Is there anything else?
Granted, the state's request is granted. The court's going to take a recess, and just the parties, if you would notify the staff, I'll come back out when the.
Thank you, because I have one short thing to discuss, and then maybe address the court, Your
Well, I
Honor.
want to let her. No, I'm going to let her.
No, that's what I'm saying, when you come back, Your Honor.
We will address whatever you want to address when you come back, but Ms. Tratnik, your motion is granted. The court's at recess.
2 minutes, Your Honor.
All rise.
my apologies for the delay. There were a couple matters that I needed to discuss with staff, and I did. So thank you for your patience on this. So where are we at this point? I'll start with the defense, I suppose.
We have a couple more matters for the defense, and we have a witness who's just parking. And he'll be
Around
here.
2:30, I think you'd said before?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Do you want to start with yours, or?
I just wanted to clarify, you're on a reserved ruling on our motion to dismiss till Monday. Are we able to provide briefing to the court or case law?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Both sides.
That's what you're hoping to
Absolutely.
hear, right?
And if you don't, I'm not going to hold it against anyone, but
Okay.
yes.
Oh, of course.
And on the, if it's all right if I remain seated on this, Your Honor, so I can see my note. Thank you. On the orders in limine on the political issues, I just had a couple more things to add and would ask maybe if we could brief that as well, because, let me start with this. On the Constitution, at least on federal, the Justice Department's principle of federal prosecution, and the ethical standards governing the conduct of prosecutors together prohibit a prosecutor from pursuing an investigation or prosecution that is, or even appears to be, politically motivated, or that violates the accused's right of fundamental fairness in the administration of justice. It's our view that this is political, and it also appears to be. Adding to what I said before in terms of the climate at the time this case was charged, there were views being expressed about defund the police, and I can augment the record on that too, just with substantive materials, as to what positions were being taken by the governor's office and the attorney general's office vis-a-vis the police. My client has always been law and order. He's had issues with them, including on the vaccine mandate. Folks that were fired from the state patrol and elsewhere that worked for the state were allowed to come and work for Sheriff Troyer. He had an open door policy if someone didn't want to take the vaccine, which was unusual in law enforcement. But there was quite a lot of clamor about state employees being terminated, especially state patrolmen and women. So he had that issue. He had an issue with them with the flag and blue line stickers on their cars here in Pierce County. There was a conflict with, was it the AG or the governor? Okay, the Democratic Party and the Transit Board against him. They didn't want him to have blue, patriotic flags on the cars. He hired people that other agencies had fired because of not complying with the mandate. He's hired 39 law enforcement officers, 16 correction officers. We'll be hiring 8 more next week, and they're all lots from other agencies that lost folks because of the mandate. The Ed was, at that time, has always been and will continue to be a law and order sheriff. Very much, there's been a lot of criticism from the folks that want to defund or have police reforms. We all know there's been legislation that's almost crippled law enforcement's ability to have certain types of pursuits and act in certain ways that had been previously constitutionally supported. And I could go on and on, but this was a very strange time, and especially for law enforcement, as law enforcement was just under attack. And after the Derek Chauvin case, George Floyd, there was a lot of fallout all over the country. But that was the climate during which this case was filed, and I think that there is an appearance of a political motive, given the timing, given that it's almost unprecedented for the AG's office to come in and prosecute police chief, a sheriff, or anyone else in public office, because their own counties or cities would do that. I'm going to go ahead and try and find other authority on this, and would ask to have the time over the weekend to brief it, as long as we're working on the brief on the motion to dismiss. But I think it's an important issue. I mean, this is one final thing on that they also charged in the Maniela's case. So that's Tacoma Police Department, and I have one of those defendants. And the question is, why was that again taken by the Attorney General's office through the Governor's office? Very unprecedented. There was no reluctance to file or anything in these local jurisdictions, but there are very strong opinions held, I think, on these issues, and that were held by these entities. So if I could just brief it over the weekend, we'll have something on Monday.
The court granted the state's motion in limine D, which reads, the state's motion to exclude procedural history and charging decisions, and granted state's motion in limine E, the state's motion to exclude any inference or suggestion that these charges are politically motivated. The court did that last month. There's been plenty of time to discuss that matter. The defense motion is denied with prejudice. You've made your arguments. The court's denied them. I made a record earlier, and now what you do over the weekend is your decision, but it's denied with prejudice. This issue is not going to be heard by the court again.
Okay, understood, Your Honor. And I'd
The
indicate-
state's motions in limine D and E remain as granted by the court.
Thank you. And I'm not saying anything changed between those times. I'm simply listening from over record, and I appreciate the court's decision. So we have a witness.
Anything else about, other than the witness? Because I want to switch over to the state. I haven't asked them if they have anything.
Anything else? No, thank you, Your Honor.
Ms.
I
Jadnik?
don't have anything, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. And witness close by here,
Here and coming up the elevator, I think, Your Honor. Kim Brown.
is it, Todd, oh,
Ms. Braun?
yes?
No, I thought you hadn't heard Ms. Bremner, and I was just repeating what she said.
Oh, I thought you wanted to address the court. Okay.
I don't.
Can we, are you ready for the jury to come back in?
Yes.
All right, let's bring the jury in.
I'm going to. I might move that for you now. Unless you get stuck on the elevator or something. There's parking coming out.
It can take a while.
I know. Is it all right if I move this, Your Honor?
Yes.
This is just kind of weird. You know, I think this is the best place a little farther back. I'm not sure. Around there.
Do you need it removed from the room?
Yeah, do you want to use it? That's probably the first question we should ask.
I think so. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Do you know what the
People usually
problem
put
is
it?
that
You want to use it?
Yeah.
It's just where you're comfortable.
I was just wondering.
The
if you
jury is
see-
returning to the courtroom.
see what people use there. Okay.
I don't know.
I know.
Thank you, and everyone, thank you, and please be seated.
What?
The defense, next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. We call Kim Brown. Like she's probably right in the center. No, I'm just gonna look at back here. Thank you. The defense calls Kim Brown, Your Honor. It's a little awkward here. And, take this way. Would you please go here in the witness stand, straight up by that easel.
Please raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Have a seat, please. Please state your name and spell your last name.
Kimberly Altimer Brown, Althieimer hyphenated BROWN.
Are we able to hear?
Should I pull the mic a little closer? Or?
You need, yeah, that would be helpful, yes.
Thank you, Your Honor, if I could approach. This mic, I'm just going to farther. If they lean into it, that might work a little better.
Kimberly Brown.
That's good, that's good, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Bremner?
Thank you, Your Honor. And good afternoon.
Hello.
Are you related to Cedric Altheimer?
He is my nephew.
And did you see him, do you remember, excuse me, did you talk to him on, back at the time of this incident, right after it happened?
I don't know if it was right after it happened, but I did speak to him that night, or that morning, yes, ma'am.
Early morning?
Yes, ma'am.
Approximately what time?
I can't tell you what time.
You said early morning?
It was early morning. It was before 5 a.m.
That's great, okay. And can you tell the jury the circumstances? Did you talk to him on the phone or in person before 5 a.m.?
I spoke to him on the phone.
And who called who?
He called me.
And how was he acting? His demeanor? from
He
what you
was upset. He was enraged. He was cussing.
tell? And what did he say,
Objection.
if anything?
Hearsay.
Sustained.
He was cussing, he was enraged, and he was angry, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And did he indicate that something had just happened to him?
Yes, ma'am.
And he seemed to be under the excitement of that
Objection.
event?
Calls for opinion, calls for conclusion.
Sustained.
At the time that he told you something had happened?
Yes,
Do you have
ma'am.
any sense of how?
I'm
long
sorry.
ago- At the time that he said to you something had just happened, do you have any sense of how long ago that event had happened?
No, I didn't ask.
Do you know why he called you?
Probably to tell me what was going on, because I'm one of the managers at the warehouse and I'm also his aunt.
Okay. And what warehouse are you talking about?
The warehouse where the News Tribune distributes the papers.
And you're one of the managers there, and have you ever been involved, or are you still involved in delivery of newspapers?
I am.
And is that here in Tacoma, in the city of Tacoma?
Yes, ma'am.
So when he called you and you talked to him about it, I think you also said before that he was pissed off?
I said he was upset, enraged, and cussing.
Got it, okay. And was he yelling at all?
My nephew yells a lot, so.
Okay, you answered my question. Did you ask him if the police pulled guns on him?
No, I did not.
Just a,
Mm.
objection is,
It's,
you ask, overruled.
thank you. Did you ask him if the police pulled guns on him?
No, I did not.
And did you ask him if the police handcuffed him?
I don't believe I asked him that either.
Okay. And did you talk to him at all about, and by the way, was this event that he talked to you about in connection with on his delivery route, something happened on his route?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you talk to him about how you handled police following you?
Objection, relevance.
Let's ask a question first. Ask a
Thank you.
question.
Did you talk to him about how you handle the police following you, when it's happened to you, when you're delivering papers, how you handle something like that?
Objection, irrelevant.
Overruled, it's a leading question, so you can answer if you're able, yes or no.
I tell all the carriers.
Well, no, okay, objection
That-
sustained.
Okay, so you want me to stop?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I'm going to let her answer the next question, so.
I'll try another question. Let me ask you this first. Is there anything special you do when you're delivering papers to make sure that you don't get stopped?
Objection, irrelevant.
Sustained.
Did you give him advice as to what to do in the future? To not have contact with the police on his
Objection,
route?
same objection.
No, the objection's overruled. It's a leading question, and she can answer yes or no, if she's able.
Can you ask me the question again, please?
It's late in the day, not that late, but did you give him any advice on what he should do to avoid having any contact with the police on his route?
Yes.
And what was that advice?
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
Your Honor, it's not offered for the truth of the matter. It's
What
it's
is it
also
offered for?
impeachment.
Overruled.
Zero.
Or no, sustained. Sustained. It is offered for the truth of the matter.
Did you try and give him any advice? in general?
Yes.
And what was his response when you tried to give him any advice?
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
Or response.
Sustained. Well,
Was-
let me ask. the
I'm
question
sorry, I'm
was
not
what-
understanding.
The question was, what was his reaction, correct?
Yes.
Overruled.
Okay, what,
Okay, I have to back and check
Yes.
again. Did you try and give him any advice?
yes,
Okay. And that's what a good aunt does, any family member, right?
yes.
Okay. And what was his reaction when you tried to give him advice?
He doesn't take advice very well.
Did you watch the video, any video of the scene of the incident?
I did.
And did you see that in the media?
I did.
Did you have any criticism of the way the police handled the incident?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
That's all I have, thank you.
Cross-examination?
No questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may step down. Is this witness excused?
Yes,
Ms.
Your Honor, I just need to check, if I get one moment, Your Honor.
Sure.
So I can go.
Just a second.
Oh.
Then I'll let you know.
Okay.
Let me try this again. What do you do yourself in delivering papers if you have any concerns somebody thinks you might look suspicious?
Objection, Your Honor, this was asked earlier and objected to for relevance. It's irrelevant.
Sustained.
It goes to the advice she gave, Your Honor, and to the whole issue in this case of whether or not,
Sustained.
when you gave advice to your nephew, was it about what you do on your route to make sure that things run smoothly?
Objection, this was asked and answered.
Overruled.
Ask me again, please.
I'm happy to. Did you give your nephew any advice based on what you do in your route to make things run smoothly?
Yes, ma'am.
And you talked earlier about his reaction, that he doesn't take advice
Very well.
very well.
Yes, ma'am.
And did he say anything like, I don't have to do that?
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Sustained.
Thank you, that's all I have.
And is the witness excused, Ms. Bremer?
Yes, thank you.
And state?
Yes.
You may step down.
I can go home.
You can go home.
Okay.
Are you ready? Have we called Sheriff Ed Troyer?
If I could ask the defense before that, has the defense had sufficient time to speak with your client about this topic?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you believe that your client may want more time to talk about this topic?
If it, no, I know, but if your court's asking whether we need more time with the sheriff, the answer is no. On the issue of his right to testify.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The defense next witness.
Sheriff Troyer. I still think she helped us.
Please raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Have a seat, please. State your name and spell your last name.
My name's Edward Troyer, Troyer.
And to the parties, we had a lengthy break, so I'm going to go through the afternoon break, and so we'll continue.
Okay, thank you, Your
Ms.
Honor.
Bremer?
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
Sheriff. You're the sheriff of Pierce County, is that right?
Yeah, I have the honor and privilege of being the elected sheriff of Pierce County, yes.
And how long have you been so employed?
Well, I've been with the Sheriff's Department for 38 years, and I've been the elected sheriff since November of 2020. I got sworn in early because the office had been vacated.
And who vacated the office?
The previous sheriff, Paul Pastor,
And you were the public information officer for a few decades, is that right?
Yeah, it was one of my jobs.
And I'll go back through that in a minute, but I wanted to ask you from the beginning that there, at the heart of this case, and we'll of course come back to it because you're charged with 2 criminal counts by the Attorney General's office.
Object to relevance.
Overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. You are charged with 2 counts.
Yeah, yes,
Okay, you know that,
absolutely,
and you know that's why we're here.
correct.
Officer Lawless, you heard him testify, and I just wanted to ask you in terms of, and apparently you were with Officer Lawless and Officer Hobbs, and we have Officer Hobbs's body cam footage saying that you had told him, or indicated there was a threat. What I want to ask you is, from what your memory of that incident and that short conversation, what do you remember Officer Lawless asking you?
Well, first I have to start with, as everybody's seen here, all those officers I've never met or seen before. They're all younger guys that work graveyard in a different agency. And I think when you saw my own deputy that's been on 3 years, that was the first night I'd met him too. So they were all new faces. Some of them looked so young, I was shocked. I mean, you know, I'm older, I'm 61, that they're actually out working the streets at night. Well, I know. And so I didn't know who was who that night, but I talked to 3 or 4 different people at different times as this event went on. I was calm and stayed by my car, and I let TPD do their job. I think some of them did it very well, especially during the escalation and de-escalation, the de-escalation, and some of them,
Sustained.
You said some of them did very well during the de-escalation?
yes.
Okay. And how long did the conversation, like you said, you didn't know these people, but you know who they are now?
Mostly, it might have to be refreshed, yes.
But you do remember, you've seen Officer Lawless, or now Detective Lawless
Yes.
testify, and Officer Hobbs. What did Lawless ask you exactly?
Well, nobody told me, what he came up and asked me, he might have been the 3rd or 4th person to come up and talk to me, because others had come up and talked to me. And when he came up and talked to me, he said something to the effect about the threats. He goes, "What about the threats?" And
Slow you down for a second.
yes,
Something like, what about the threats?
"What about the threats?"
Okay.
Yeah,
Not-
that's what I remember.
Okay. And so when he said, what about the threats, what did you say?
I'm not worried about it.
Okay.
At that point, I knew he was a paper boy or a paper delivery person, and I'd already told people, and I even told on the 911 call, you can say I'm not worried about the threats. I don't want anything done about it. I just want everybody to be safe as they're arriving. And I said I wasn't worried about the threats, and that he was doing a paper route, and I knew that when they came up and talked to me. And I said, let him go do his job. You know, I mean, I just wanted to let the guy go do his job. He could have told me that from the beginning, and none of this would have happened, but he didn't.
Objection to the narrative, move to strike the last portion of that unresponsive answer.
Your Honor.
Starting when?
That Mr. Aldheimer should have just told him that he was a paper boy.
Sustained.
You were just talking about the fact that Lawless asked something like, what about the threats? And then you were answering what you said, right? Did you ever deny being threatened?
No,
And are you absolutely sure about that?
yeah, I never denied it.
And did he ever ask you, were you threatened? Did you ever say no?
No, I never said, no, I was. It didn't happen because we never got into that much detail of what was going on. I just said I wasn't worried about it.
So your memories of something, he asked, what about those threats? And you say, don't worry about it.
Correct. No, don't worry about it,
And
or
was-
something along the lines.
Was
Correct.
Officer Hobbs within arm's length distance?
I'll take it, the word that it was Hobbs, but like I said at the time, I didn't know who was who. And there were 4 or 5 other officers there, and one or two of my deputies at the same time. And it was dark,
How long did the conversation last?
a minute.
So longer than we've just been talking here.
Correct, it was a short conversation.
Now, and you'd never met Lawless before, is that right?
I've never met him before.
There was just an objection here about something I want to ask you about in a little more detail. When you said whatever, that's okay, let him go back to work, or whatever it was. What's your best memory of what that answer was from you?
My answer was, if he's doing his paper route and if he's working, let him go do his route. Which, I'm sorry,
Which what?
was in the report. It says that right in the report, that I said I wasn't concerned about it if he was doing his paper route, to let him go do his route.
Right. And you're talking about the report from Officer Lawless,
Correct.
and that's verbatim in his report, what you just testified to. Is that right?
Within a word or two, yes. Yeah.
Let me just grab that. This is exhibit. It's been offered. What's on the back? 19. I'm just not used to that, thank you. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Granted.
Thank you. I'm showing you what's been admitted. Is
No,
exhibit
it's not been,
19.
no, it's not been admitted.
Oh,
It's
okay.
not been offered. Well, let me check with the court staff.
19 is not admitted.
Yeah, I do not show it's been admitted, but it's been marked
Thank you, Your
and
Honor.
identified.
Thank you. Can you take a look at what's been identified and marked as exhibit 19, please?
Yes.
And what is it?
Well, it's Tacoma Police Department and the Pierce County Sheriff's Department use the same reporting system. So this is a general police report.
Okay. And does it pertain to the incident on Deidre Circle?
Yes.
Okay. And we would offer the report, Your Honor, 19.
State objects to a police report going back to the jury. She can certainly question him about it, but state objects.
Basis of the objection,
Multiple layers of hearsay.
sustained.
Your Honor, it's a public record. There's also, it's a document that's been authenticated through their witnesses, and police reports are admissible.
It's hearsay, sustained.
All right, I can bring this up on the break, Your Honor. Exhibit number 19, what does it say about what we were just talking about? Which is the statement that you gave in response to his statement. What about the threats?
Gotta get glasses on. Which part? What I just testified to?
Exactly.
Okay. The sentence reads, and I take it that this is Officer Lawless.
Sorry, he can use it to refresh his memory, but he can't read from the report. Objection.
Your Honor, I object to speaking.
Overruled.
I informed Troyer that,
Just a second.
Oh.
The objection's overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please, Sheriff.
I informed Troyer that Altheimer appeared to be a newspaper carrier and he was on his regular route. Troyer advised that we should let him go if that was the case.
May I approach the witness to retrieve the exhibit, Your Honor? Thank you. All right. So, that's what was said, that's what was asked, and that's what was said, right?
Correct.
And at least Lawless put what you said in his report, that part of it. 19.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to turn to something else in this. If you indicated you were threatened, right? And we'll go back to the incident in a minute, but why would you, after he threatened you, then decide it was okay to let Mr. Altheimer go because he was a paper carrier?
Well, in our line of work, we're threatened a lot. And I've been threatened a lot over the years. Some because I was our media guy and whole high profile, and some major cases and controversial cases. I've had threats via email, some that have been painted on bathroom walls that our people have gone to and taken pictures of, some where we've identified suspects and subjects, and once our people or an agency went and determined that they were just mad and harmless, I never ever pursued a single threat against me ever.
Fair to say it goes with the territory?
It goes with the territory. If you don't like being threatened or then you don't want to do this job.
So, how exactly did you learn that he was indeed a paper carrier, and when did that happen?
Once the police started arriving, a couple cars and some conversation, a couple of them came up and talked and mentioned offhand, we think he's a paper delivery guy. And then when they confirmed that he was, I mean, I never was excited about the whole thing. I just was worried for the officers that were arriving to know what they were getting into. And once I found out that because I could hear him rant and raving and upset, but at that point it was Tacoma handling it. And once I found out that it sounded like he calmed down and he wanted to go on his paper route, I was totally fine with it. I want him to, he's out working. And I had no animosity for him. I wanted to go finish his paper route job. And when we all left there, there's no report being written. Nobody asked me any other questions. I figured that was the end of it. Because I've been in worse situations where we've come out, and that was the end of it. No report was written.
And was the case closed out that night or early morning?
From what I understood, the case was closed out because nobody gave me a case number. Nobody told me they were writing a report. By me looking at the paperwork and understanding it, the case was closed and then reopened the next day. And I never got a call. Nobody ever called me, gave me a case number, told me a police report was written, asked me in detail what happened, because if they would have said, hey, we're going to do an investigation, we want to know everything that happened, I would have told them. I mean, I know that those phone calls are recorded. I've been listening to them, good and bad, for 20 years.
The narrative at this point.
Sustained.
Now, Officer Lawless wrote the report, is that right?
Yes.
Did he ever contact you in any way about what happened in that incident?
No.
Never?
Nope.
And were you ever contacted as a possible witness or victim by Officer Lawless or anybody else in connection with that incident?
No, nobody ever talked to me about it again.
And has anybody in law enforcement tried to interview you about what happened?
No.
Nobody?
Nope.
And you're charged with those crimes out of that incident, is that right?
Correct.
I want to go back a little bit on your background, because we'll need to come into some more detail about the incident. Can you tell the jury, where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in Tacoma, Washington.
And what part?
Fort Lewis. My dad was military, and we moved into a house in the north end of Tacoma on 31st and Baltimore. My mom and dad have since passed away, but my stepdad still lives in my childhood home.
And were you raised in a two-parent home?
No.
Can you tell us about that, please?
My mom was very young when she had me. She was 17 when she was pregnant, 18 when she had me. And then I had a little brother, and it was the three of us, my mom and my little brother.
Okay. And did you go to high school in Tacoma?
Yeah, I went to Downing Elementary and Truman Junior High School and Wilson High School, and then TCC for 2 years. So I've been a North End kid or a product pretty much my whole entire life.
And you've, of course, stayed in Tacoma with your career, is that right?
Correct, joining the Pierce County Sheriff's Department.
Did you go to school after TCC?
I was up at Western, and I was 21, and I started applying for police departments, and I was fortunate enough to have an opportunity with the Pierce County Sheriff's Department. Back then, 500 people applied for 9 jobs. Now it seems like we have 9 people applying for 500 jobs. It's the sign of the times. And so I had the opportunity to be hired, and since I'd worked my whole entire life, I had a lot of life experience by working my whole entire life, so they gave me a shot at that age, and I wasn't about to pass it up.
And why did you want to be a police officer or a sheriff's deputy?
Well, I've told this many times before, that when I was little, some of the best people I met were cops, and some of the worst. Yeah, I mean, I lived in Tacoma, and I think policing was a little different that time, but there were some really good incidents that I remembered from childhood, and I wanted to be that guy.
What was your first, well, of course, you had to go through training.
Yes.
And what did that consist of?
The academy was only 10 or 12 weeks long back then.
What is it now?
I think it's 16 weeks, 17 weeks. It's a lot longer and more thorough.
Go ahead, I cut you off.
Yeah, and then I came out, and did training for a couple months. And they gave me a car, and a police radio, and a gun, and told me to go work out in Gig Harbor, which I did. Which it wouldn't be Gig Harbor, it'd be the resident district, but most of Gig Harbor wasn't Gig Harbor at the time. So that pretty much after getting off training was my first assignment, was in the Peninsula Detachment.
And then what about after that assignment on Peninsula Detachment?
I took over a program. I came back out to patrol, so I worked in Spanaway, Parkland, and then I also worked in Lakewood, when Lakewood wasn't the city of Lakewood, it was still the county. It was still pretty rural, and so I worked out between those areas, and we kind of switched districts and sides. So one night I'd be clear on all the way to Meridian to Graham, and the other night I'd be Lakewood all the way to the Thurston County line.
Incidentally, size-wise, how does Pierce County compare to other counties in Washington State?
We're the second biggest county in the state. When I first got hired, I think we had 540,000 people in Pierce County, and now we're up to about 940,000. I think Pierce County is going to cross over 1 million here pretty soon.
Okay. And so what's the biggest county?
King County.
So go on, what did you do then next in terms of your assignments with the sheriff's office?
Well, being in the sheriff's department, we have 1.63 people per thousand. Cities have 2.4 people per thousand. It's something we're still struggling with. Like right now, we only have 0.82 people per thousand. So we wear a lot of hats.
Okay, let me stop you. Just explain what that means.
Well, we have one. So if there are 1,000 residents, a lot of departments will have 2.4 officers. We had 0.83. So most of the departments were 2 or 3 times bigger than us, as related to population. Now add our geographics from Mount Rainier to all the county lines in Puget Sound. We're a huge county. So I guess my point was, we all had multiple jobs, and we still do all the time.
So it wasn't as linear as I'm making it out to be, that you go
No.
to this assignment, and the next assignment, and the next assignment.
Not in the county, not the sheriff's department.
Can you tell us what else you did before you became the public information officer, where you served for a couple of decades?
Many years in patrol, many years in the Marine Services Unit, both at the same time. I had a little bit of media background, so we were producing cable shows on the local government cable channels, and I was the backup person to the PIO. And then I won the Crime Stoppers job, competed and won for that, which is a nonprofit that's controlled by civilians, but Tacoma Police and the county each had a liaison to bring. No, yeah, I probably should, so I don't. I can hand. Okay, that's fine.
Thank you. If I can approach the sheriff, Your Honor?
Granted.
Yeah, that's fine.
You can continue when you're ready. I just thought I'd give you a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. And so I had the Crime Stoppers job and did liaisoning with that nonprofit and program. I thought it was a really good program, and they eliminated the position of Crime Stoppers, both in the county and the city. But I thought it was important enough that the sheriff let me continue to keep it as I went back to patrol and doing other assignments. So that was my turns out to be my third job at the same time. So I was in a Marine unit working patrol and running Crime Stoppers.
And was that before you became PIO?
Yes, yeah.
And then what year did you become PIO?
22
About
years ago.
22 years ago. And what was your media background that you just mentioned?
Self-taught. I think I did a little bit of radio in college when I was at Western, and at the time they probably thought I was an expert, so they called me and asked me to be the past PIO's backup. And so I was his backup and helped him, and then we started doing video, and it was a new thing for law enforcement to be able to reach out to the public that way. So I was able to do that, and then when our PIO retired due to injury, couldn't make it back, I took over for 3 months, and then they opened it up as a permanent position, which is appointed by the sheriff. Like my PIO now is appointed by me. And so I was appointed by Paul Pastor when 5 or 6 people applied for the job. He appointed me, and since he stayed, he's the longest running sheriff at 19 years, I stayed the whole time with him.
Okay. You stayed as PIO while he was sheriff.
Right. Mark French was the sheriff at the time, but Paul Pastor was the operational person that I think made these decisions, approved by the sheriff. But shortly after I became PIO, the second previous sheriff left and Paul kept me.
Okay.
Yeah.
During your time as PIO, you've dealt with, obviously, the high-profile cases out of the county. Is that right?
Many.
Okay. And so you had to understand the appropriate procedures in investigations and the appropriate things you can say to the press in ongoing
Objection leading.
prosecutions. I wasn't done yet on that.
Overruled as background for likely follow-up questions.
Thank you, Your Honor. So you basically would have to know about police procedure, about what can be said to the media. Anything else?
It was a complicated job, and it still is, because you have to try and get information out to the public quickly, but you can't compromise the case, and you have to try and make it accurate as possible, and you have to be able to stand up and say when you got something wrong the next day, once it was clarified, because sometimes investigations take a year, but they want information right away. And, my job was to try and make the public feel safe and try and get them the information, what was going on in their neighborhoods, or, why somebody, we average 25 to 30 homicides a year, times 20 years. I've handled hundreds of homicides, and it's important, because when somebody shows up in your neighborhood and there's 5 police cars and you see them wheeling a body out, you want somebody to tell you why. And so you had to fight that along with,
Narrative and unresponsive.
Overruled.
you had to fight that with the public's need to know, because we need to let the public know, because majority of homicides and majority of these type of cases are family related, targeted. We know who's done it right away. We just got to prove it. And then we need to let the neighborhood know that they're still safe
Right.
while we still continue on the investigation.
You kind of see that in that case in Idaho right now, where they've said everyone's safe and then they come back.
Correct.
You've had a number, obviously, many homicides while you're PIO, and then many of which have been very high profile, including the Lakewood 4. What year was that? About?
I always say everything was 10 years ago, give or take 5 years, because it's all blended together, but I think it was 12 to 14 years ago.
So those are 4 Lakewood officers who were gunned down in a coffee shop?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
I'm just asking in terms of what his roles have been, Your Honor. I'm not going into the facts of the case. Of what his background, it's just background in terms of his work and expertise, given what he's charged with.
Limited, with that understanding, overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. So that was a case where 4 officers were gunned down in a coffee shop, is that right?
Correct.
And so, in a case like that, did you actually go to the scene, or what would you do?
I went to the scene.
And do you also interview witnesses and officers?
That was early on a Sunday morning, and went there and saw what happened, and it was really surreal and odd. And yes, I talked to people on the scene and tried to get the preliminary information on something like that when it's that traumatic, because everybody else is distraught.
And did you also work with Chuck Cox, who's here in court?
Yeah, Chuck Cox has been sitting behind me.
Relevance.
Sustained.
Again, it's just background, Your Honor, the cases he's handled. I'm only using 2.
Sustained.
Do you know Chuck Cox?
Yes,
And do you work with him now?
I work with them now.
And in what capacity?
Nonprofit called Charlie's Dinosaur, and we also have the Christmas Box Angel, the Angel of Hope in Woodbine Cemetery.
And is that for the Charlie and Braden Powell? cause?
Correct.
And what's Charlie's Dinosaur?
Objection, relevance.
Background, Your Honor.
Sustained. Background, overruled.
Sure.
Keep going.
Charlie's Dinosaur is something that we created. Chuck, you okay? So Charlie's Dinosaur is something we created when Charlie and Braden Powell were killed. And our detectives that went out there got really close to the case, watched the kids, and for many times before the event happened. And we found a poster of a dinosaur that he drew, turned it into a nonprofit, and our deputies for many years bring clothing to foster kids and kids in need under the name of Charlie and Braden Powell. We called it Charlie's Dinosaur. And Chuck and I have been part of it since
10 plus 5 years?
12 years.
Are you involved in other charitable and community activities?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
Your Honor, again, it's background.
The background's finished, sustained.
So, I only
Non-law enforcement oriented.
I only talked about one, Your Honor. These are non-law enforcement oriented.
Sustained.
I'd like to get this marked as an exhibit. I'll redact this one here.
Ben,
Yeah, do you have a clean copy of the list? Ed,
Of what list?
the list of your,
Yes.
oh, good, actually,
Is this M as in Mary?
I think so.
yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Your Honor, if the
Well, I
witness
guess I wrote a word on it.
is referring to
This is
something,
mine.
the state needs to see it.
Well, I haven't gotten that far yet.
Agreed.
Okay. So it's going to be M.
Ben.
Thank you. I wrote a little bit, I'll redact it. Yeah, that'd be great. Can I approach the witness?
Yeah, the procedure is that it has to be shown to opposing counsel.
Your Honor,
Sustained. Yeah, well, the court, it's not a motion, but agreed.
I'm not sure why we're having this conversation, but I'm showing this to counsel.
Because I ordered it.
And for the record, while they're looking at that, did you put down a list of your activities outside of law enforcement, charitable activities to talk about today?
Yes.
Okay. And is that the list that we just talked about?
Yes, and some other positions that I've held that are law enforcement oriented.
State objects to this exhibit. There are also handwritten notes at the bottom, and for one thing, I want to see if these are the same, but state objects to this, any use of this exhibit.
I hadn't offered it on it. I was going to show it to the witness.
She's asking the witness to testify to it.
Let's let the process go forward. The court agrees with Ms. Bremner, so if it's an objection, it's overruled at this time.
And may I approach the witness?
Granted.
Thank you.
Yes.
This is Exhibit 19 that we just talked about, the list of the various charitable and other community activities you've engaged in over the years. Is that right?
Correct.
How many pages is that exhibit?
3.
Okay. There is some writing on it, I think I said earlier, and those are some notes that could be redacted. Is that right?
That's I wrote those notes on the bottom of that, not realizing what it was. That was my fault.
That's right.
Oh, can I have it's the witness's notes or your notes that are on that document?
The witnesses. The other copy had my notes. Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm not offering it this time. Let's talk about your family. How many children do you have?
I think my wife covered that. As far as numbers go, I'd be guessing like years. When I have, okay, so I have 2 stepchildren with my wife, and then I have 3 children that we have adopted out of foster care, and then I have 4 or 5 grandchildren and 3 or 4 foster grandchildren at the current, right now at the current time.
And do you have we have some photos, I think, of your family. I can get these marked. Do you just want to mark them in a sequence? Or as one? No, a sequence.
You want individual?
Might as well, I think so.
Individual?
Yeah, thank you.
And Your Honor, as those are being marked, state objects to relevance.
The clerk is ordered to mark the exhibits.
Thank you, Honor.
Was that the normal process? That'd be my, yes, then granted. So is it Exhibit N? Okay, so N through Z and then AA.
Thank you. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
They haven't been shown to the state.
Correct.
Yeah, you can give me a copy.
I just want to make sure these are, we have them here. Okay.
I don't know, whatever stuff you gave me.
Okay. That's good.
Is that the one?
I think so.
And Your Honor, before the court rules on the state's objection, I would ask that the court look at these.
Oh, I need
State objects and wants to be heard outside the jury's presence.
I haven't even offered him on it.
The court's preference would be that they be identified by the they've been marked, and so they be identified as to what they are. Then I would certainly be willing to look at them if that's what counsel wants me to do, but
Sure.
the court's preference would be that they, if they're able to be identified, that they be identified as to what exhibits N through Z and AA are.
That was my next step, Your Honor. Thank you. I'm going to do it right now, if I could approach the witness.
Granted.
Okay, showing you the exhibits. Can you just start with exhibit, the first exhibit, say what the number is and what's depicted in the picture and who's in it?
Exhibit N would be my son, my grandsons, my wife, my granddaughter, and my brother-in-law, and his wife.
And does that picture accurately depict your family
Yeah, that was from when I was being sworn in
as sheriff?
as sheriff, yes.
Go ahead. What's the next letter? Is it O?
Yes, Defendant's Exhibit O. That are my granddaughters and my 2 grandsons and 3 smaller foster kids that are living with their family, or were at the time of the picture.
Living with whose family?
My daughters, so it'd be my foster grandkids.
And is she the one your wife mentioned was a foster child you adopted who became a foster parent?
She's actually my wife's biological daughter. She was my stepdaughter who's doing this, correct.
Okay. How about the next one? That's great.
P would be my grandson and my son and me. They're within a year apart of age, and they've gone to school together, and we're going on a trip somewhere.
Have you all have masks on?
And we all have masks on.
Does it accurately depict you and those members of your family?
Yes.
Okay. How about the next one? I'll take that. Thanks.
Oh, this is where we were going. This is Q? No. Yeah, Q?
Yes.
It's my son and grandson when we were celebrating their 21st birthday down in Las Vegas at Hell's Kitchen.
And again, it accurately shows all of you.
The 3 of us, yes.
Thank you. How about the next one?
That is R. That would be granddaughters, grandsons, and somebody my grandson's stepbrother.
Okay.
Yes, in the snow.
All right. Accurately show everybody that you just described?
Yes.
Okay. And the next one?
S would be myself, my dad, my stepdad, but he's been my stepdad since I was 16, so I call him Dad. For my wife and my 2 granddaughters, we go to this place a lot. It's one of those Japanese restaurants where you can fit a whole bunch of people in and you can eat together, where they cook for you.
And that was exhibit, what was the number art and the letter on it?
S.
S, go ahead, thank you.
And T is the same photo, same place, different time, with some foster grandkids, my daughter, my son, my grandson. I don't know, another little kid. Sometimes they come and go and I don't remember their names. And then myself and my son,
Okay. And that was T?
T.
Go ahead, please, the next one.
That's me and my son and my two grandsons.
Is that you?
Me, yes.
No, is it Exhibit U?
Oh, yes,
Okay.
it's Exhibit U. Sorry.
That is you, too, right?
Yeah, sorry.
What's the next one?
Exhibit V, it's me and my 2 granddaughters.
Thanks. And what's the next letter?
This is W. We're all in costume, and we're at a place called Halloween Town. There's a place. And it's everybody I think I mentioned, and there's 3 or 4 people with masks on, myself, my granddaughters, my daughter, and my grandsons. Pretty sure that's everybody.
Okay.
Yep.
What about the next one?
My 2 granddaughters. That's Exhibit X.
Okay. And the next exhibit?
Is myself and my wife with one of our granddaughters in Vegas at a dance competition.
You weren't dancing, were you?
No. Dance
No.
dad,
Dance dad.
dance
dad.
grandpa.
Okay, and what's that letter?
Why?
Thank you.
Z is me and all the boys at, this year at a farm up north, haunted house type thing,
Okay.
corn maze type thing, yeah.
And then one more, I think.
AA is just a picture of my house I included because we've talked a lot about it.
Right.
And, and I wanted people to see it, to understand what we're talking about, where and what, yeah, I guess.
When was that taken, this picture of your house?
That was taken within the last year and a half,
And does it accurately depict the front of your house, the driveway, and the house itself
yes,
that you lived in at the time of this incident?
correct.
Thank you. And incidentally, on number N, is this a jury box?
Yeah, I got sworn in courtroom 100, and so they put my family in the jury box,
Okay,
yeah,
sorry. I just wanted to
yes.
make sure we had that context. Your Honor, these have been shown to counsel. We'd offer N through, well, N through Z, and then also AA, which has been, copies have been given to counsel, and I'll hand these up to the court.
Your state does not object to Exhibit Z.
Exhibit,
Z, which was just handed to us, which appears is the photo of the house.
oh, that was AA. Well, let me
It
look
was
again.
AA.
Okay, AA.
Let me double check.
Is this the photo of the house you were talking
Yes,
So this is Exhibit AA.
State objects to the other 13 photos, again, on the grounds of relevance.
Your Honor, it's background. This is a criminal case. It also goes to the racial diversity of his own family. He's been accused of something involving racial profiling and a false statement about a black newspaper carrier.
Exhibit AA is admitted, and I will give this to the clerk so it can be marked. Exhibits N through Z are denied. They're not relevant under ER 401 and 402.
And they're not relevant to the,
To any issue
Charges?
before the jury. ER 401, 402. So exhibits N through Z are denied.
so the court's saying no family photos under 401 and 402?
The ruling's been made.
All right. Thank you, Your Honor. Can I also get this marked? Oh, wait a minute. Thanks. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yeah, let me make a quick note here about Exhibit AA. first get the court's rulings on the exhibits? Okay. Okay. Yes, you may.
Thank you. Showing what's been marked, Exhibit BB, what is this?
That's a map.
And does it show where your house is?
Doesn't show my house, but shows a graphical picture of where my house is and correct outline.
And have you actually put a route on there of what happened in the incident where you drove?
Yes,
And does the exhibit accurately show where you drove, and in red, your actual route, like the streets accurately, and also your route accurately?
correct.
We offered the exhibit, Your Honor?
This is Exhibit BB.
Correct.
No objection.
Exhibit BB is admitted.
And also, we'd like to, at this time, put up for the jury I think it's Exhibit 8.
The
I think
letter.
it's Exhibit 8, Your Honor,
Oh, the state's
yeah, because I want to compare this to ours.
exhibit,
No objection, but I don't think it's,
I think it's Exhibit 3 or 4. That's what my notes show.
State Exhibit 4.
Exhibit 4, okay. Right, Exhibit 4 has not been admitted, but,
Can I look at it?
I just asked you to help me make sure that we're oriented the right way. That's the right way. Yeah, just do it the way you think.
No, I'm sorry. I gotta step back a couple
I
feet.
know, it's all right.
That's the way you had it.
Oh, good. I was right, for once. Okay. I want to show you first, permission to publish, Your Honor, AA.
state?
no objection. You mean BB? Oh, I'm sorry, A. No objection.
Yeah, AA granted.
Takes a minute, right?
Please let me know if you're able to see this exhibit on the screen for you.
Oh. Here, okay, yeah.
Are you able to see that?
And it's blurry. It looks just like it does up there.
Oh, it just needs to focus. Other way, top. Thank you. Sheriff, is your screen okay now?
Yes,
Okay. What are we looking at here?
we're looking at my house, my residence, where we live.
And so this is Vista View Drive back this way, right?
Correct, the road in front of it is Vista View Drive.
And we heard testimony before about yours and Wendy's bedroom up at the top floor. Is that very top floor under the roof what we're talking about?
Correct,
And then in terms of where you saw Mr. Altimer, it was from that room?
correct.
And if you could orient the jury as to where he was, obviously it's outside the picture, but if you can give them a description of where it was when you first saw him.
Well, when I saw the car, see where the white truck is right now?
Right.
There was a dumpster, like for remodeling, big commercial dumpster. For remodeling, it was right up against the garage, so we could just toss stuff off the deck right into the dumpster from inside the house. And so where I saw the car would probably be from point of view of where the picture's actually taken, maybe a little bit to the right, down the hill a little bit, is where I first saw the vehicle on Vista View Road out there.
So about where Corinne is and then across the street?
Correct, say that again?
About where Corinne is sitting and then across the street, that direction?
Yeah, it'd be, well, I think we have a different angle on it. It'd be more to the right. Yes.
Okay. Okay. And what did you see?
Well, first I heard noises, where the dumpster in my garage door, where I heard banging around out there. And so it's very easy to go up in those windows and just look straight down to see what's going on. We live in a really, really quiet neighborhood. I mean, not a lot of traffic because there's only one way in and out. Wake up in the morning and there's deer tracks and
Wow.
occasional bear. But I heard noises and I looked out and I saw a car parked down where I just described with the headlights off.
And why, did that cause you any concern?
Yeah, I mean, it caused me concern because in the few months prior to that, my son had his car broken into and a guitar and saxophone stolen. My wife's had her car crowbarred a couple times. We've had our community mailboxes where there's 4 or 5 houses with the locks all punched out of them. And it all happens late at night, very early morning. And so, and also I have elderly neighbors on all sides of me, and they come to me all the time when they're victims of crime and things happen in the neighborhood. It's been that way for 20 years, so it was suspicious.
And so what did you do, if anything?
I watched the car and it started to drive away, and with no lights on the wrong side of the road, and then went up about across the street and pulled into one of my neighbor's driveways. And I saw it, and then it backed out, and then went up further and pulled into a driveway. And at that point, I decided I was going to try and go get a license plate or see what was going on, because somebody's going in and out of neighbors' driveways.
Let me show you a map. I don't think anything will show up on this. Maybe the Sharpie. I want to do the mark on that. I'm going to ask you about Exhibit 4, but also about the map that I just put in front of you, that you put up your own red path on.
Correct.
So with permission of the court, first I offer BB and then request permission to publish to the jury on Yellow.
Did I already admit BB? So BB is, it should show on the back if it's been admitted. So BB's been admitted.
Right.
Permission to publish, state?
Yes.
No objection.
Granted.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right. Is this the best way to orient this? I guess it is. Is that the best way, Sheriff, for me to orient that picture, or that map?
Yes.
All right, can you tell us what we're seeing here?
The route I took after I got in the car, the X on here on, you guys, on the lower end towards the water is my house.
All right, let me catch up with you. This is Vista View. I'm just going to do it on here and not on the, because I don't want to hit the focus. Is that your house?
Yes,
Okay. Go ahead. So then you left your house and went to the right on Vista View. Right?
correct.
And when you said there was no way in and out in your neighborhood, it's quiet, were you talking about Vista View Drive?
Yeah, you can go in, the map was bigger over here or over here. There's 2 ways to go in the neighborhood, and then you can make all these turns and go in there.
Got it. So you went down Vista View Drive, and then,
At the sharp corner right there, it turns into Narrows Drive, or Narrows Place.
is that the way you drove?
Yes, where the red line is.
Now, at that point, did you still have this car in your sights? Or
No.
had it gotten ahead of you? Where did you lose it? So to speak?
I lost it. The car was gone when I got in my car, and I couldn't see it anymore, so I thought I'd drive kind of the direction it was going to see if I could find it again.
So you made the turn onto
Narrows Place.
Harris Place, and there's a cross street there, Bridgeland Lane. You didn't go down, you just went down Narrows Place.
No, I didn't see anything.
Okay. You continued there driving on Narrows Place, right?
Correct.
Did you see anything?
No.
Then,
Well, eventually I did, but not past the second block.
okay.
Yeah.
And then it looks like you turned on to North 27th.
Correct. I turned on to North 27th because I saw a car parked in a driveway with no lights on.
How many blocks would you estimate you traveled?
As far as the crow flies, it's short, but I drove 1, 2, 3 blocks,
3 blocks, okay.
3 streets.
Now, we have this larger exhibit up here from the prosecutors,
Uh-huh.
and it's got, if I could ask my client to step down, Your Honor,
Go ahead.
to be with me. It's got quite a different path if you look. Take a minute to orient yourself and then tell us, isn't that quite different than what we just looked at in your map?
Correct.
Okay, how's it different from what you can see?
All this through here, I have no idea where that came from. That could be a way I drive home or from the way I end up here. If I saw a car driving with headlights on, I wouldn't think anything of it, and there's cars driving around. When I drove through here into home, there's one house on, but yeah, that's right. That's where he said he first saw me.
Right.
That's where I first saw him, outside my house, and that's.
Wait, if you want to circle, we can still write on this because it's not admitted, if that's all right with the court.
Should I do it
No
a different-
objection to
should I do it
writing
a
on
different
it.
color?
Yeah,
No objection.
No objection to
Grant.
writing on the
Thank you.
exhibit.
please, so show your house.
So my house is right here.
Maybe just put your initials or a big circle around it. Okay, so you're saying you saw him where he apparently saw you?
But, yeah, I mean, I was home and it was pretty close. It was just right here. That's where I saw the car, one house down from where he marked it.
And while you're looking at that house, one house down, you can see from your bedroom window then him in that driveway, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Go ahead then. So all this other route that he has here had nothing to do with you, it sounds
No,
like. Okay.
no. Saw the car here.
Mhm.
I drove up here. I don't know anything about this.
But you don't know about what?
This and this red line here.
Okay,
Red
so
line.
just for the record, you're doing a whole red line that snakes around to what street?
So I went from here to here, and then I saw the car right here. That's where I saw the car.
And that was how many blocks?
3. Well, I mean,
That's it.
1, 2, third turn.
Third turn.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So that's where I saw the car parked on the road right there. Well,
Was it-
the Deidre Circle's another road with a cul-de-sac here. The cul-de-sac and the circle, like other drawings, isn't there. You gotta go down the road, a couple houses in there, and we were never back in here at all, anywhere. So none of this matters. I mean, not that it doesn't matter, but it doesn't, I never saw any of that. He was parked right in here.
Thank you. You can resume your seat. Actually, we had a picture from Officer Lawless where he put the cul-de-sac right next to the cars. Was that accurate?
No, but I think the car here, his car might have been, the police cars might have been there, and he might have saw the cul-de-sac, and
Okay.
not a lot of us are good at, so I give him some grace.
I'll
You know.
give him a little grace, not too
Yeah,
much.
if I have to draw that, it might look the same.
Okay, thank you. All right, so getting back to your diagram, or your map here. Exhibit BB. When you pulled in here, the car was just parked in the driveway?
It was parked on the opposite side of the direction of the road, in the driveway part that goes by the sidewalk up into the driveway, so the transitioning thing.
Were the lights on or off on the car?
Off. Parking lights were on.
So when you saw the car, what did you do?
I recognize it as the same car as that I saw down by my street, so I drove and pulled up behind it, and as I slowed down, the driver got out, walked back towards me of the car.
So were you in the middle of the street when he got out of his car and came?
Yeah, he was facing the same direction I was facing, and we were not quite in the middle, more towards the curb going the wrong direction.
And so you parked, he parked?
He was already parked, and I drove up and to get a better look, and as I drove up and slowed down, he came out of the car.
And what was his demeanor?
He was mad. He came back at me. I could see his muscles pumped up, and I could hear him yelling. I couldn't tell what he was yelling until he got. I didn't get out of the car because he got right up on the car, and with me, I had not called anybody or anything, but at this point, and he was screaming at me. I heard words like, "I'll take you out," and I was trying to listen, and he was swinging his arms,
Can you
And,
show how to swing his arms?
well, he put his hands on the car and he was just swinging them and just like very animated. And I was kind of in shock because I've never seen the guy, didn't say anything to him, never did, even hardly there. He just came and laid into me and motioned for me. It looked like he was maybe motioning for me to get out of the car. I'm not going to get out of the car.
Right.
That's the worst thing I could have done to escalate a situation and get into any type of physical confrontation. Then he went back to his car and drove, and I thought he was going to drive away.
Why'd you think that?
Well, because he started to leave, and I didn't follow him. He made a left onto that circle, that Deidre Circle area, and about, 20, that's when I started calling 911. I just sat there.
Not 911.
I'm sorry, calling dispatch. I've heard both the words. I called directly into the dispatcher with the number I know by heart that I call all the time. It's on speed dial on my phones.
What do you call it? Do you have a name for it?
Well, we have a lot of different names for it. Some people call it the BS line. Some people, because we talk about anything,
Okay.
even from families and things. But I know that gets me direct to somebody. Because when you call 911 from a cell phone, sometimes it'll go from the tower to the state to the county and bounce around. So I just call the back line like I have for 20 years for everything that happens when I'm on the way to a place. On the calls we talked about earlier, they
Right.
call me on that line. That's the line they call me from. So I called them and told them what was going on, but he had gone into the street, the circle there, and within a few seconds he came back out and turned towards me and pulled up in front of me.
Let me stop you there for a second.
Yeah.
So I want to show this on here because we've seen that too. So you're in here, and you were, your car behind him facing in the both same direction, right?
Correct.
Did he pull a U-turn after that?
He made a left and then came out and turned back towards me.
A left where?
At the very next left, Deidre Circle. I'm pretty sure the road's called Deidre Circle because that's what the street sign says. But the road's probably a house long or two houses long. I think I didn't even really know it existed in our neighborhood. I had to look up at the sign to figure out where I was because it's just not a very long road or any road that any reason people would go by.
Okay, so he turned back around, so which way was he facing?
Facing towards me.
And how close did he get to your car?
Probably 2 car lengths.
And did he have his lights on or off?
At this point, he has lights on.
Were yours on?
Yes.
What went through your mind when you saw him coming back like that?
Well, I wasn't going to engage with them. He got out of his car door and he stayed up there at his car screaming and yelling. And had already called 911 and told him what had happened. And he was screaming stuff at me like I'm a black man in a white neighborhood and you're only chasing me because I'm black. And I told him, hey, I was trying to talk calm. We were from here to the post away from each other.
Okay.
And I said, hey, I've got a black grandson. He wouldn't appreciate that. People saying that about me. And I have black friends. And for some reason, I think he said my wife was black, but she's not. My grandson is, but she's been mistaken for it before.
So when he said, well, let me ask you this first. When he first came up to your car and he was mad and agitated and yelling and gesturing, did you understand everything he said?
No, just that he was mad. I understood part of him saying he'd take me out, and he was swinging his arms, and I wasn't about to get out of the car.
Okay. So I'll take you out. What did that mean to you?
Well, at this point, when I called in, I needed to let I did ask for 1 or 2 units because our training tells you I'm not equipped to engage. And no matter what happened, as mad as he was, that wasn't anything I'm going to win. I'm not a fighter, and And wouldn't want to do that. And I would want the police coming because I know that this needed to be de-escalated. And you can hear me calmly ask for 1 or 2 units to come to try and attempt to get that done.
So what did you think he meant, or how did you interpret that phrase?
Well, I mean, I say when you're going to take somebody out, I don't think he meant the dinner. I mean, I think he wanted to take me out and fight or get me or kill me or something. I don't know. He was so angry. But when I said that to the dispatcher, I wanted the police out responding to know what they were getting into. I mean, when the police are responding, I mean, if I wouldn't have told him that and how mad he was, and he would have showed up and some of the officers got hurt, that'd be really bad. I'd feel terrible if I didn't give them all the information, what I thought was going on, and somebody would have ended up getting hurt there or killed, you know. And when I say killed, I don't mean exaggerated, because I've had 5 of my own guys killed line of duty, and some of them in similar type situations.
So I'll take you out, is that what you were referring to when you said he wanted to kill me?
Yeah.
Have you ever heard the phrase, I'll take you down?
Oh, yeah.
Is that a little bit different than I'll take you out?
Yes.
How so?
I'll take you down seems like, come on out, I'm going to fight and kick your ass. I'll take you out means I'll take you out. I didn't know what he meant by it. Temper, anger, screaming, couldn't understand the rest of the words. You know, they weren't friendly words, and a lot of swear words and things like that in there. And that's not normal behavior for somebody to come up and do that to somebody. And so I was just relaying to the police, which you hear on the 911 tape, is what my perception of what was going on, because when they show up, I want them to know. I want them to know that you're coming into a hostile situation and somebody who's not being reasonable, which I think everybody saw.
Did you ever hear President Biden use that phrase, talking about killing terrorists will take you out?
Yes,
And that means killing terrorists, the U.S. will.
I assume so, yes. Mm-hmm.
So the tape that we saw, the body cam that we saw from Officer Ventura showed Mr. Altimer very agitated and using the F word repeatedly.
Mm-hmm.
Can you compare the demeanor you saw when you saw Mr. Altimer to the demeanor we all saw on that video?
Well, I know that he didn't think that he was agitated with the Tacoma police. He was that agitated and a little bit more.
With
A
you?
little bit more at the beginning, and then he was, at the very minimum, he was always that agitated when he was yelling at me from the car and screaming at me. And I didn't engage with them then either, other than talking from here to the pole away, and I stayed right by my car door so I could hop back in it if I needed to. And he didn't come back at me. He stayed there and screamed and yelled until we heard the police sirens come, and then he hopped back in his car, and so did I.
When he first came up to your car, did you have your window up or down or in between?
Well, I rolled it down. It was in between. I rolled it down because I thought he was going to come talk to me. And he said something somewhere in there about knowing I was a cop. And if I had a chance, if people ask me if I'm a cop or he's a sheriff, I always say yes.
Why do you say yes?
Well, because they know. I mean, I've been in the same neighborhood and town and city and on TV for 20 years. I don't wear that on my sleeve.
Right.
But sometimes when people are angry and mad, and I say, yeah, yeah, and then it calms things down. Here it didn't calm anything down. It just escalated it. And he said he knew who I was, but he never told me who he was. He never told me what he was doing, never told me he was delivering newspapers, never told me he was on any type of route. He just was angry and had this appearance of wanting to fight and threatening me. And it never changed until the Tacoma police arrived. And then when he went over and sat on the bumper or wherever with the police, at that point I couldn't understand or hear him anymore. I still stayed by my car because I wasn't going to interfere with the Tacoma police and what they were doing. It's their agency, and I know, and by calling them, I know that they know how to handle that situation. And they did. That officer, Ventura, did a great job. Sorry he went to Texas. I'd try and recruit him. I mean, those are the type of people we hire because we have to work alone. Our men and women do, and they need to be really good at that. And he was really good at that.
So Do you remember the exact moment you thought, oh, wow, he's actually a paper carrier?
Couple people came up and told me that he was a paper carrier, and it looks like he's delivering newspapers. I said, oh, well, gosh, why didn't he just tell me that? I mean, he could have just told me.
When was that in relation to when you talked to Lawless and Hobbs from TPD?
A couple people had told me that he had the conversations about being a paper carrier.
Was that before then you talked to Hobbs and Lawless?
Yes, yeah.
And what was your reaction? Was basically, why didn't he tell me?
Yeah, why didn't he tell me he was delivering newspapers? He had plenty of chances to do it, and why didn't he tell me he was delivering newspapers? And if so, I would have introduced myself. I mean, I've done it many times with people in the neighborhood, and I hate to use a word, but my wife and I help homeless people up around the shopping center all the time, and people live out of cars, a mile from our beautiful neighborhood. And I would have, and I did say that I thought he was homeless because I saw stuff piled up in the back of his car. I couldn't tell they were newspapers, but stuff piled up.
Right.
And he had, I think, a hat on, was dressed for the warmth. And unfortunately, we have a lot of these people that have to live like that in our own neighborhood. We can go up even tonight. I have a friend that owns a restaurant up the street, and they've had problems in the back. And sorry,
Unresponsive, sustained.
unresponsive. I'm sorry, did I not answer your question?
I think you probably answered it
And more,
more
okay.
fully, which I appreciate. In terms of homelessness or whatever else, you didn't know he was a paper carrier. And I think we all know that there are homeless amongst us everywhere, including our neighborhoods, everywhere, and it's just a tragedy. But I guess my question
Your Honor,
to you.
is there a question here other than the commentary?
She's getting to it.
Thank you, Your Honor. You saw him testify, and he testified, he said he was throwing, I may have this not exactly right, but he was actually throwing papers while you could see that.
No.
Okay. So you never saw
I saw him in front of the house, and then when we had the encounter, he may have been throwing papers, and that's when I got in my car and came out, and he made it up there, but I never saw him throw a paper. If I would have saw him throw a paper or saw papers going out, I would have went, oh, okay, he's a paper guy. I wouldn't even have went and introduced myself or even tried to talk to him at that point.
So at the scene, how long, all told, do you think you were at the scene after the first officers arrived?
I'm going to guess start to finish, 15 minutes.
And did you see body cams on any of the officers, if you remember?
I knew that Tacoma was implementing body cams, and our department had not yet. We were still working on it.
Excuse me, okay.
Mhm.
And do you remember whether or not Officer Lawless had one on?
No, I don't remember. I didn't know till after the fact that he didn't have one on.
Okay. But Officer Hobbs did have one on, is that right?
Only because I've seen and heard the video.
The one we've heard in court here?
Yes.
Now, just to digress for a minute on process and training, what are field notes for, the tablets you have out in the field? Why do you have those as an officer?
Well, you write field notes down because when you have to write your report, you don't want to recall it all from memory. I mean, your times and what happened and names. I mean, and I could tell by that report that didn't have any.
How could you tell?
Well, look at my name block. It just says Ed Troyer. If he wrote a halfway report, and I'm sorry for the lawlessness. But look at.
Sustained.
Okay.
For the narrative, sustained.
All right, thank you. I'm going to show the exhibit 19, which is Lawless's report.
Yep.
And you just said that you could tell that he didn't take field notes that he used for the report. How can you tell?
Well, under my name, there's no middle initial, there's no date of birth, there's no height, there's no weight, there's no hair color, there's no eye color. It just, for age, it says 00. Ed Troyer, 00.
For
And
your
that,
age?
yeah, well, 00 means, well, I don't even know what 00 means, that they didn't ask or didn't know, and he just put 00 in the box. But other than that, all the other boxes are blank.
Okay. And what are those, generally, what are those boxes that are blank?
Well, we put that information in so we can tell the difference between people.
Right.
And my name's on a lot of police reports, and somebody could have looked up past police report and seen everything on there and filled it out. My name's on a lot of police reports as helping Tacoma police when I've showed up sometimes and they're in a brawl in the middle of the street, when I've been a victim before, or information reports.
Objection, non-responsive.
Well, let me just ask another question. You say your name appears on a lot of reports, you just describe a couple, any others?
Yeah, we could be here all day looking at police reports with my name on. I'm just saying this is the least amount of information I've ever seen on a police report with my name on it.
Thank you. So, and I think you heard him testify that he didn't take any notes that time, right?
Yes,
And with respect to this particular report, this was not written while the incident was open, is that right?
as far as I know, I thought the incident was over. Nobody told me a report was being written. I didn't have a case number. I didn't even know there was that minimal basic report until the Seattle Times called me and told me about it. And I said, it took me a few seconds to even understand what they were talking about. And I had to go look it up. And you can see that's when I looked up.
Non-responsive.
Sustained.
Let me just ask another question. With respect to that report and any follow-up with you, who's the first person or entity that contacted you about this incident after it happened?
The first person to contact me about this incident from that night was months later when Jim Bruner from the Seattle Times called me.
How much time had gone by?
A couple months.
Okay. I'm going to show you Exhibit A, which is just the CAD that has some marks on it. We haven't offered this one yet, but is this the CAD in this case?
That is a CAD sheet.
Okay.
And
And my only question about the CAD in this case is, did it indicate the case was closed out before it got reopened by Officer Lawless and a report was generated by him?
yes,
Okay. Is that unusual?
yeah.
How so?
Usually it would draw another case number because it's a different time and date. And once that's closed out in the system, it's closed out. As we go to a lot of calls and we just solve them on arrival. Like, it's solved.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. This is a CPD report, not a PCSO report, and I'm going to move to strike his opinion about a different police agency and how they handle that.
Overruled.
Okay.
Testified about his background.
Did you finish your answer?
Both of our agencies and most agencies in Pierce County use the same report writing format, and we all do the same rules so it doesn't confuse the records and law enforcement support and South Sound 911. So yes, I can read the CAD and see that it was closed out, and that was the end of it. And I never heard another thing since then.
So we just talked about how long this incident lasted and what happened. That's not a complaint. You weren't very far from home. So did you go home afterwards?
Yes,
And what time was it, do you think, when you went home?
probably 20 minutes after. When the whole thing ended and everybody left, I went home. Same time.
During this incident, did you ever, with knowledge that the information was false, initiate a false report of an alleged occurrence, i.e. a death threat?
No.
Objection calls for a legal conclusion.
Overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. Let me ask you again. I didn't hear your answer.
No, absolutely not.
Just so it's clear, did you ever, with knowledge that the information reported, conveyed, or circulated was false, initiate or circulate a false report or warning of an alleged occurrence?
Objection, Your Honor, legal conclusion for the jury to determine.
Overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. And your answer is?
No, I did not.
And you're absolutely sure about that?
100%. Because I wouldn't do that. The reason why I'm here testifying is the media's made me out to be a racist and the state's made me out to be a liar.
Did you ever make a false report?
No,
Did you ever deny at that scene that there'd been a threat?
no,
And did you ever make any kind of false or misleading statement to any public official at that scene?
no,
Would you ever do that?
never.
Have you ever done that?
38 years and I don't have a single complaint of lying, racism, assault, use of force, sexual discrimination, or otherwise, not even a report filed, let alone confirmed report or investigated it. Never even had one filed.
Pretty unusual for an officer, isn't it? In any department.
Yes, I mean, a lot of people like to complain, and I've been very, very public, and I lasted in my job 20 years. A lot of people don't last 2 months in the media job for many reasons, not just that.
Right.
But I've spent my whole life getting along with everybody and taking care of people.
So you went home and it'd be about right time for your wife to be getting up and going to work, sounds like.
Yeah, we have crossover a lot. A lot of times, I'm still up working or watching TV when she gets up to go to work.
Okay. What about on this incident?
She was a little bit of ways away from normally waking up, but I came in and slammed the door, and it was a little loud coming in, and she kind of woke up, and I told her what had happened.
What'd you tell her?
I told her that there was a car out front. I mean, we've been victims many, many times. I said, I saw a car outside with no headlights on, and it took off, so I went to investigate, got up there, and I just gave her a quick little 30-second brief of what happened. I wasn't, I really don't bring a lot of work home, but
Okay.
since this was in our neighborhood and it concerned her and concerned her house, I told her.
And did you mention, as she testified to, that you'd been threatened by Alzheimer?
Yes,
And you, specifically recall telling her that?
yes.
Why did you tell her that?
During the 30-second conversation, I mean, I think I communicated with some neighbors on social media too, and just gave a condensed version because people were wondering what was going on in our neighborhood. And I just told her the condensed version, and at that point, I think she was awake and started getting ready for work.
Did you, anything unusual happen after that?
Yeah, I heard a car revving an engine up outside, and I didn't know what it was. Maybe I thought it was one of the officers pulling into my driveway or something, because I saw lights and I heard a car loud, and I looked out and I noticed that it was same car that I just had the confrontation with up the street, and my wife came and looked out, or I think my wife might have even looked out first. I looked out, and it's so long ago, I mean, the details. My wife looked out and let me know there was a car out front, and then I could hear the car, and I looked out, and we were both standing there looking out, and we heard him screaming. He was outside the car, and we could hear him screaming, and he was kind of flinging his arms around and making motions. And then he threw a newspaper up towards our house. And then he got in his car and drove away.
Did he rev his engine? I think you did say that
Yeah.
before.
Well, I heard the engine revving, like revving up his engine.
So you heard him testify. I think he said something along the lines of he just wanted to give you a newspaper or drop one by to see if you wanted to be a subscriber or something like that. Is that the case?
No, I haven't. We've never subscribed. I mean, we stopped taking the newspaper when it went to digital media.
Yeah.
And that's why, obviously, I took the newspaper before that because of my media job.
Right.
My media job, I used to cut the articles out and glue them in a deal. That's how before computers.
Well, that's
Yeah. And
It's easier now probably, right?
yes, yep.
So when this happened, and by the way, was it Mr. Alzheimer that you saw out there?
Yes.
What went through your mind when this happened?
Well, I thought it was odd after all that he'd come back to my house, and I was concerned for my wife, and my son is in the downstairs basement. My youngest lives with us, and I know that if he saw that happening, I would hate for him. He was very protective of us. If he went out and got in a confrontation with them, so I was thinking all kinds of things could go wrong here. Luckily, it wasn't a very long incident, and he got in the car and drove away. But then I stayed up all night waiting to see if he would come back, or I didn't know what he was thinking, and why he would do that.
By the way, as sheriff, are you on duty all the time, or potentially on duty all the time?
Yes.
And can you explain that to the jury? What does that mean?
Well, I'm the elected sheriff, and all my deputies are on duty all the time, too. And a lot of us have protect our neighbors in our neighborhood. There was a time when that was accepted and thanked, and then we get into recent days and wouldn't advise anybody to do it now.
Now, there, in times past, some jurisdictions required officers to be armed at all times.
Correct.
Is that the case with Pierce County?
No, in fact, we discourage it
Right.
now. It was a different time in the past, yes.
Were you armed during the incident with Alzheimer?
No,
Okay, so when you got in your car to look at his car, you didn't grab your duty-issued firearm or anything like that?
no. I am not a gun person. I only have, when I retired, I bought my first 2 guns in my life before I ran for sheriff. My other 3 guns are all owned by the department, and I just didn't want to be gunless. And my 2 new guns are still in the box till I retire again.
Okay. Do you know when that's going to be? I don't have to ask that, you don't have to answer.
My term goes through 2024.
What other weapons or use of force weapons do you have at your disposal as any sheriff's deputy?
I have none.
You have none, okay, so you wouldn't have a baton or expendable?
You have to be trained and certified in that, and I'm not, so I don't even have them or keep them or own them.
So, again, when you went out to drive and see where this individual was, you didn't have any of those things?
None.
Mace,
Nope,
pepper spray,
nope,
tear gas,
nope,
baton,
none of it.
of course, no gun belt, any of it. Is that right?
No, it's been asked a few times what I was wearing,
Right.
and I've kind of wanted to get up here to tell people what I was wearing.
What were you wearing?
It wasn't a raincoat or a windbreaker. I have like normal, you'll see me, I have gray and black clothing and not much else. And I was wearing gray jeans, not slacks, gray jeans, a sport coat, and just a decent shirt underneath it with gray boots. And pretty much how I always dress when I'm going to an event or a talk. Go to a lot of talks at sportsmen's clubs and political groups and different rotaries and different fundraisers at night. I pretty much always look the same, that style.
Kind of a uniform for you.
Yeah.
It was dark out, there were no streetlights, right?
We have no streetlights in that whole entire neighborhood. There are none. Until you get up to the Narrows on the main road, it's dark streets.
Did you see Mr. Alzheimer's race before he got out of his car and came and confronted you?
About when he came out of the car, it was just kind of a shadow, and then he came towards me, and then I could see his race.
So just for the whole time coming from your house, I think, your house right here, all the way to where, you had the confrontation back when he turned around, until he got out of the car, did you tell his race at all?
I couldn't tell his race. I wouldn't have been able to tell the gender or how many people were in that car until that happened.
So did you have occasion to have contact with him yet again? In any way? Just your family and house, I should put it that way.
Well, I didn't have contact with him, but the following night, I heard a car outside. My wife was sleeping. I looked outside and didn't think much of it because the car was driving away. I can hear cars because it's just so quiet where we're at. You can hear a car, and I heard a car, and the car drove away and left, and I didn't think much of it at the time.
And then what happened?
My wife went to work and got a hold of me, and somehow during that time period, she said there's another newspaper in the driveway.
If I could approach the witness with exhibit, I think it's C, Your Honor.
Granted.
Thank you. Does this appear to be the newspaper, exhibit C?
Yes, this is the newspaper.
And I think Mr. Alzheimer actually identified it by the way he wrapped papers. Did you hear that testimony?
Yes,
Okay, thank you. You saved this all this time.
on accident.
Oh, how'd that happen then?
I think we threw the other ones away, and that one was wrapped in a bag and thrown just inside down by our foyer in our house. And after this all happened, I remembered tossing it down in where we just tossed junk or stuff, and I went down and found it.
And you brought it here.
Yes.
Did you ever ask for a massive police response of 40, 43, or 46 cars?
No, I asked for just, I think I said on the tape, 1 or 2 units, that's it. I said 1 or 2 units, that's it. I just needed somebody there to calm them down, and I knew, well, and even when I said 1 or 2 units, for us, two units means 2 single-person cars.
Okay,
And so when I say 1 or 2 units, I just wanted to make sure, if it's 1 with 2 guys would have handled it, and a second unit if they were riding single. I knew 2 guys could handle it, and that's all I wanted, that's all I asked for.
okay. And the CAD report itself, have you reviewed that?
Yes.
Does it look to be accurate?
Eh,
Except for-
You got to remember that those are in the heat of the moment entries that are going on. And the times, if you look at the general, when it happened, when they arrived, and when we left, and who was there, yes, that's accurate.
Okay. We also, just a couple other things on suspicion. Do you know what a Terry stop is?
Yes,
And is that basically something where there's reasonable suspicion, criminal activities afoot, an officer can follow and detain on less than probable cause?
correct.
And can you describe to the jury what a reasonable suspicion is? Maybe give an example.
Well, if somebody calls and says there's somebody in their neighborhood wearing dark clothing and just left their driveway, and it's an unreasonable time to have that happening, and an officer shows up and finds somebody 4 houses away, they can stop them and talk to them and figure out where is he coming from, going to. And that's how a lot of our people find car prowlers and thieves and others that are doing that. I mean, when we were talking to all the jurors, I think everybody raised their hand and has been a victim of some type or another. And it's very clear that I'm a law and order guy, and I want our people to go out and find the people that are doing this, and not back away and de-police and defund. I'm like, be creative. We still need, there's so many cars stolen. We used to have 300 a month stolen, and now it's 900 a month.
900 a month?
A month.
Object to non-responsive, move to
Okay.
strike the last portion about the crime rate in Tacoma.
Sustained.
Is, you encourage people to be proactive, why?
Because that's what, unfortunately, because that's what we signed up to do. I mean, people have become Tacoma police officers, sheriff deputies, or other agencies, want to help people, they want to get involved, they want to solve problems, they want to stop crime, they want to make neighborhoods safe. It just seems like a lot of those tools have been taken away from us. So I still want people to be creative. I'm pro, come up with some creative way to catch suspects. I have a special unit that does that,
Okay.
an undercover unit, and we love,
Objection non-responsive and irrelevant.
Sustained and non-responsive.
Do you have a unit, a special unit to help you be more aggressive on the rising crime rate?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
Let me ask you this, how many sheriff's deputies are there in Pierce County?
not enough. 300 and right now we are 52 sheriff deputies down and 46 corrections officers down. And then when you add in, we support the military, and so we have a lot of military people, and if they're on leave doing military duty, and then people that are hurt, at any given time, I have 1/3 of our department not available to work, on top of being less staffed. So we are working a lot of overtime, mandatory shifts, and trying to be very creative. I've had to shut down some units to put people back in patrol. Our canines now actually go out and handle calls.
Objection non-responsive.
I can
at
ask
this
another
point.
question.
Sustained.
I do object to the speaking objections. Let me ask you another question if I can, Sheriff.
Counsel, that was not a speaking objection, that was
Oh.
specific objection based on the evidence rules, sustained.
All right, maybe it was the prior one, John. I think. What about, in terms of numbers, are you in charge of the correction, of the jail?
Yes,
And so that'd be all the corrections officers, is that right?
correct.
How many of those are there?
Object to relevance.
Sustained.
Who else are you in charge of?
The Civil Division in Pierce County, the Corrections Department in Pierce County, the Patrol Division in Pierce County, all of the Sheriff's Department precincts in the Gig Harbor, Mountain Detachment, Foothills, and then we contract with the cities of University Place, cities of Milton, and then we do specialized services for there's 19 or 18 police agencies. So when you take towns like Faircrest and other smaller towns, if they need special services like warrant service or SWAT or any of the specialty, canine, marine services, mountain rescue, any of the smaller towns rely on us to do that for them.
And you testified earlier about not having ever had a complaint for racial profiling, discrimination, harassment, assault.
I've never even had one filed.
And I would also ask you, given that, obviously you've never had one filed for false reporting until this case.
Never.
And this wasn't from your department, this was from the state. This charge, you can say that much.
Correct.
The prosecutor is the only one who can charge a criminal case. Objection, relevance.
I said state, Your Honor.
Well,
Overruled.
so can I answer? Who's overruled? I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm not sure.
Go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. I
The-
was going to say
the
who's on
state's
phone
objection.
first. Okay. You testified today that you haven't had a complaint within the department for racial profiling, racial discrimination.
Correct.
Harassment, any kind of use of force, et cetera. Laid out all those different types of potential things that you've never had one even filed, let alone sustained. And then I asked you if you ever have had anything, it would go without saying you haven't had one for false reporting until this.
Correct.
And this is not from your department, is it?
Correct.
It's from the state and these prosecutors.
Correct.
How do you feel about being charged?
Objection, irrelevant.
Sustained.
John, we might want to take this outside the presence of the jury, but let me ask a couple more questions while we still have the court time, if I could. Once you got the call, was it from the Seattle Times?
Mm-hmm.
And who was the reporter?
Jim Brunner.
And do you remember the conversation as we sit here today?
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell us about it?
It wasn't accurate. It was 50% of things that I'd never heard or didn't happen that night. And I mean, I told him my version of it, and not a lot of it made it into the article. And that article became the living, I think we heard, I'm going to get in trouble. I think we heard testimony that a lot of the stuff that other people said turns out not to be true. That was in that article. But that article became the living thing. Every other media didn't go out and call me or do this on their own. They just picked up that story and ran with it. And it was black newspaper boy chased by white sheriff. And that made it around the country as being the narrative. And that is what elevated it to, I guess, the state attorney general being interested in picking up.
Non-responsive and irrelevant.
Sustained.
Do you know how it got to the Attorney General?
I have no idea.
Was that media, quote-unquote, narrative true that you just described?
Absolutely not.
How so?
Well, I'm not a racist, like media says, and I didn't lie, like the attorney general's office is saying. And I have not been able to talk about this because as soon as they got involved, as much as I sit down and write, my lawyers will tell you, can I talk? Can I talk? I want to say something. And now I understand I would have been a fool if I did. And so been taking my attorney's advice and just being quiet and putting up with this. It's been rough.
But we weren't your attorneys during that.
No.
You took the advice of attorneys that you had at the time.
Correct.
And so the first time that you've told what really happened out there is here, is that right?
Yes, and you'll see that I said that in the news media, that I was looking forward to talking to a jury and telling the facts of what happened and letting them decide.
And have you told the entire truth here?
I've told, considering there's months that have gone by, there are some details, but I've told the truth, and I've told honestly what was in my heart and what I was thinking.
might want to break now, Your Honor. I wanted to play next his 911 call, and then I had some other matters to go into.
What, would it be fewer than 5 minutes?
No.
To do this?
No.
That's what it is then.
I think the call's a little bit longer.
Well, it's 4:15 now.
Okay.
So,
Oh.
break for the day?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor.
So, members of the jury, I'm going to read this to you today. You got it yesterday off. During this recess and every other recess, do not discuss this case among yourselves or with anyone else, including your family and friends. This applies to your internet and electronic discussions as well. You may not talk about the case via text messages, email, telephone, internet chat, blogs, or social networking websites. Do not even mention your jury duty in your communications on social media such as Facebook or Twitter. If anybody asks you about the case or about the people or issues involved in the case, you are to explain that you are not allowed to discuss it. Blame me. Do not allow anyone to give you information about the case, including in your electronic communications. If you start to overhear a discussion or receive information about anything related to this case, you must act immediately so that you no longer hear or see it. If you become aware that you or another juror has been exposed to outside information, you must privately notify the clerk. Do not discuss these matters with the other jurors. Do not read, view, or listen to any report from the newspaper, magazines, social networking sites, blogs, radio, or television on the subject of this trial. Do not conduct any internet research or consult any other outside sources about this case, the people involved in the case, or its general subject matter. You must keep your mind open and free of outside information. Only in this way will you be able to decide the case fairly, based solely on the evidence and my instructions of the law. As I told you earlier, and that's true now, we are not going to meet on this case tomorrow on Friday, so please be back in the jury room by 8:30 on Monday morning, and so have a great weekend. Thank you. So you're excused at this time.